Have you been struggling with your whiskey game lately? You're just not finding the enjoyment that you thought you would out of it? Well, I'm here to discuss today ways to enhance your whiskey enjoyment. There's a lot of steps that we can go through, and we're going to start covering those right now. So if you're like me, when I first got into whiskey, I didn't realize that there was so much that went into it and went into the enjoyment of it, and it took me forever to actually figure that out. Well, I'm going to give you a few tips, tricks, and ways of thinking about whiskey that you may not have thought about in the past. Some of these are going to be things that you probably already know, and if you do, I understand. But if you're new to it, I think these will actually really help you out quite a bit. First and foremost, we're going to talk about the glassware that you're using to drink your whiskey. Now, I realize you can grab any old glass or cup or anything like that, but if you're using a red Solo cup, whiskey's probably not for you. So think again on that one. All right. Now there's a couple that I would suggest, and there are dozens, if not hundreds, of different versions of these. And basically you just need to find the ones that you actually like the most. Now, the most common is going to be for the times that you're going to drink either on ice or have a mixed drink with your whiskey. And those would be just simply a tumbler. And that's just a pretty basic tumbler. These are great for ice. You put a big ice ball in it, and they drink quite well. But these aren't going to be for really enhancing the notes that you're going to get from a whiskey. You know, it's the most common, easiest to get, but the one that you're really going to want to look for is what they call a Glencairn. And a Glencairn is like this. This has what they call a tulip shape, so it's larger at the bottom, narrower at the top, if I can speak. And the reason they do that is it basically funnels all of those aromas up through the top. So when you nose, which we'll get into that in a minute, you're going to take full advantage by having that funneled into a smaller opening. And that is an improvement over the tumbler. The tumbler lets too much out, and you're not going to get as many aromas, as many notes from smelling it. And these are what is preferred if you want to get kind of bougie. This is what's preferred. But they do have their advantage. Now, they'll come in different shapes, sizes, but this is pretty much the classic shape. So this is something you want to look for, is a Glencairn. While you can drink from pretty much anything, again, I suggest staying away from the red Solo cup. The plastic's going to take away from some of your taste and some of your nosing aromas. But, I mean, these are the more typical things that you're going to see in a whiskey enthusiast bar or on their shelf. This is what they're going to use. And these will actually help you get a little bit more out of the experience. Next on the list is nosing. And I kind of already mentioned nosing in the glassware part. It's preferred to have a Glencairn or at least a tulip-shaped glass of some sort so that those aromas get funneled right up to you. And Again, those are beneficial in helping your aroma and nosing experience. The things you're going to want to look for is vanilla, caramel, oak, maybe some nutmeg, maybe even a bit of cinnamon. You're going to pick up some grains possibly. But how do you know what those notes are? A suggestion that I have in helping you find these notes. If you have some of these spices around the house, as you're nosing and later on tasting your whiskey, have a thing of cinnamon, maybe some nutmeg, maybe some grains, or anything that you think, vanilla bean. I mean, anything that you can think of that is normally talked about when describing a whiskey. Have just a little cup or glass with some of that in there so you can smell that and smell the whiskey and go back and forth, training your nose and eventually your palate, and to be able to pick up each one of those notes. It's kind of an old school way to do things unless you already are familiar with what those aromas are, but sometimes what we think of may change over time if we don't work on that on a daily basis or consistent basis, shall I say, and we need a refresher. So having those things on hand when you're nosing or tasting your whiskey are going to help you improve later on down the road at picking up other aromas or even tasting notes, because your nose directly affects your palate. So you've got the nosing down, but for some reason you're not able to pick up the differences between a couple of different whiskeys. Well, that would be because you need to clean your palate in between. Just a little bit of water can help clear all that out. Sometimes you could use dry crackers or unsalted crackers or something that neutralizes the flavors you had before and resets your palate. Again, water is probably the best for that, but I've heard some other people using crackers or things like this to help reset it. So that's something else to consider when you're trying different bourbons, or you even just want to pick up different notes within a particular whiskey. And speaking of water, if you want to try something a little more toward the advanced side, adding a little bit of water to your whiskey can actually change the overall taste and aroma of a whiskey. And this works across the board, whether it be bourbon, rye, scotch, any of those that I've ever mentioned in the past. Putting a little bit of water can actually have a huge effect. And when I say a little bit of water, I mean even just a drop can actually affect the taste and aroma of your whiskey. So this is something else you might want to test out one day, is once you think you've got all the aromas down, all the tasting notes down of, say, your favorite whiskey at that point, try just putting a drop and see if that affects the aroma or the taste of that whiskey. If not, add another drop or two or three. See what makes a difference, at least to your palate or your nose at that time. And then start backing off slightly until you get to a point where you can see just one drop making a difference. It will take some time, but this is something that you can accomplish with practice. And like all good things, it's all about practice. And then there's something a bit on the fun side. At least I've had a lot of fun doing it with some of my friends in the whiskey club I'm in. We will do what's called a blind. If you don't know what that is, here we go. If you do, just bear with me. A blind is basically several different whiskeys poured into whatever glass you want, but you don't know what each one is. And then there's two ways you can do this. One, you can know the particular whiskeys that you've picked, but not know what glass they are. And that's where I suggest to start, because at least you may know the tasting notes of those. But picking them out blindly is way more of a challenge than you would think. At our whiskey club, we do those a few times a year, and we're stumped on at least one out of that blind every single time. I don't think any of us have ever actually picked out everyone exactly the way they were. This is another good exercise. Once you've kind of, well, I don't think you really ever master that, but once you have done that, then go for a double blind, where you don't know what the whiskey is, and you don't know what glass they're in. And then you have to find the notes in each one of those and try to determine what the whiskey is, not knowing what they are to start with. These are really good ways to up your game. This is a good way to teach your palate, teach your nose how to pull out all the different qualities that each whiskey has. Some of them are a lot of fun just in general. And some of these are really fun to do with friends because you get to see them struggle as well as you struggle to figure out what they are. It's kind of a neat little game to play. And finally, the last suggestion I have is once you feel you're ready, either seek out or start your own whiskey club. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be expensive. Basically what it is several like-minded people getting together, enjoying a whiskey, and talking about it. And much like the club that I'm in, it starts off about the whiskey, but then just ends up being conversations we have with the person next to us or the person across from us. And it's building those friendships and those relationships that really are what it's all about. The best part of being part of a whiskey club, besides meeting new people and gaining new friends that have a similar interest, is that you get to learn from them as well as they learn from you. There may be one that's been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years, and another person at the same table that's been doing it a week, a month, a year. And each one have their own strengths and weaknesses when it comes to experiencing whiskey. You're able to learn from each one of those people. And everybody has a place to start. You have to start somewhere, learning about each one. And you can do research and discuss each one of these prior to tasting or nosing, or while you're doing either one of these. But this one is probably the best experience that you can have, really leveling up your game. Leveling up or enhancing that whiskey enjoyment that you might be seeking or you think you've been missing for so long. If you're thinking about starting your own club, there are resources online to help you determine whether or not you're going to incorporate or just keep it between a group of friends, whether you're going to charge people to be a part of it, or it's just bring a bottle and enjoy freely and share amongst everyone else. There's so many ways to do it. The way I would suggest it is find those like-minded people and discuss amongst yourselves and come to an agreement on how your club will be ran. Each one's going to be different, and each one is going to have its own level of enjoyment As long as everyone agrees, you're going to have a great time and you're going to learn a shit ton about whiskey. So by doing these things, you're guaranteed to enhance your whiskey experience. If you have any questions, comments, other suggestions, please let me know down in the comments. We can share together all these different ideas and maybe incorporate in your own whiskey experience. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that these suggestions were helpful to you in learning more about whiskey or enjoying whiskey more. As always, long ashes and full glasses to each and every one of you, and we'll see you in the next video. Hey, don't forget, like, share, subscribe. There's only about 90% of you are not subscribed. I would really appreciate it. I'm gaining more and more every day, and I appreciate each and every one of you. But it would be nice to see the channel grow a little bit more, and let's get some more views out of it. So share it around on the social medias. You know, also I have a TikTok and Instagram and another Facebook page, basically all the social medias. So there's a link tree out there. Click on those, and don't forget the affiliate links down in the description. I've got a ton of them, so if you want something, now's the time to take advantage of it. So, we'll see ya. Bye.